Hi everyone, welcome to my kitchen. Today we're making baked beans. I'm so excited to be back in the kitchen, and I figured this next 8 weeks together we're going to be working on mostly like homey, home cooked meals that are really hearty and comforting, I guess, so comfort food. So today is baked beans. This version that we're doing are vegetarian, vegan actually, but you can add in pork and stuff like that if you so desire, but I encourage you to try this version. So we had our beans. We've got 2 cups of small beans. I've got a package of mixed beans that I wanted to use up. You're going to be getting navy beans, which are like a typical baked bean, and then you soak them in some water with some salt for like either overnight or at least for a few hours, and then cook them in water with some more salt. And then I've got a couple of bay leaves in there just to make them taste good. So you'll want to keep them, set them aside. Mine cooked for about 45 minutes, so you actually want them to be cooked pretty much all the way through. Test a couple to see, and then we'll put them into the oven. So this is a bit of a longer process than just opening up a can of baked beans, but I think you'll find that these are super tasty, and you can have them for breakfast, you can have them for lunch, for dinner. They make a really great side, or just a meal on their own with like a piece of toast or something like that. So right now I've got some olive oil heating up in a Dutch oven. If you don't have a Dutch oven, you can use any kind of oven safe pot, or you can do this in a separate pan and then put these in a baking dish that you can put into the oven. And then I've got a medium cooking onion here that's fairly roughly diced, and we're going to cook those down. You can add a little bit of salt to these just to get them sweating their juices out. And I've got my oven preheating to 350 degrees. I like to caramelize the onions as much as possible so that they have lots of flavor. And then if you do baked beans with usually like a salted pork product, you can put ham in, or bacon, or pork belly or something like that. But since these are vegetarian, you kind of want some of that savoriness. So if we just did baked beans with some ketchup and molasses, they might just be too sweet. So that's why we like to caramelize the onions to make them even more tasty. But we're also adding in soy sauce, or tamari you can use if you have at home, and some mustard to give it more depth of flavor. And then the other thing is also with adding bacon or something, you get that smokiness. So what we're doing to substitute that smokiness is get some smoked paprika in there, which makes it very tasty. Okay, while our onions are cooking, this is when you could be finishing up cooking your beans or measuring out your ingredients. So I'm going to actually measure. I've got a big measuring cup here, and we need 1/3 of a cup of ketchup and 1/4 of a cup of molasses. And if you've done this with me before, which I think most of you have, you'll know that I'm not like such a stickler for precise measurements, especially when it comes to like cooking like this. I'm more of a go with the flow, use what you've got. I'm going to give you everything that is called for in the recipe in your food kits this week, but if you like this recipe, I encourage you to try different methods. Or like I, for instance, I'm giving you dry mustard, but I'm going to use like Dijon mustard. You could use regular yellow mustard. What dry mustard is basically just ground up mustard seeds, and then mustard that you get in a jar just has some added salt and vinegar. And I'm using tomatoes that came out of the garden. You can omit this completely, or I like to have like a little bit more tomatoey because it just makes it that much more savory, I think. Our onions are starting to brown. You can see there's a bit of like brown spots on the bottom of my pan. So I'm going to start adding in my beans. So I'm reserving the liquid that the beans are in. I'm just going to strain out the beans into the pot. I'll add in the smoked paprika. I'm going to probably do another like 1/4 teaspoon of salt. This is our soy sauce. And ketchup and molasses. Stir this pretty well. So now I'm going to add, I've got this jar of tomatoes. Oh, I forgot my mustard. So I think the recipe is like a teaspoon of dry mustard, so I'm just going to do about maybe a teaspoon, maybe a tablespoon of yellow mustard. And then a can of tomatoes, which actually have a lot of liquid in it. These are from my garden that I just kind of cooked down a little bit. So give it a stir and see how liquidy it is. Pretty good. But you're going to want to add another layer of liquid on top so that the beans cook in a bit more water. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying. Like, this is thick, but when you're going to cook them in the oven, we're going to bake them for about 1.5 hours, maybe even 2 hours. So you want some extra liquid in there because it's going to evaporate and cook the beans and everything kind of together. So what I'm going to do is grab this, which is why we've kept the cooking liquid here. And you just kind of want a layer of liquid on top of the beans, just to cover so you don't see any of the beans poking through. So that was maybe 3/4 cup of water. I'm going to put the lid on. We're baking it at 350 for about 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours. It could go even longer, but we'll check it at 1.5 hours and see what it looks like. Hey everybody, it's been 2 hours since the beans have been put into the oven. I'm gonna give them a little look. make sure they're done. Okay, bubbling away. We'll give them a taste and make sure they're to your liking. Give them a stir, and those are looking really good. I would cook off a little bit more liquid, maybe let them go for another half hour or so, but these are still pretty good. Nice and thick. The beans are cooked through. And so we're gonna make that our dinner tonight. We're gonna have some beans and some sauteed greens on the side and some toast. And that's it, that's our dinner. Anyways, I hope you like this recipe. I'll see you next week.